Hi, I'm Wendy Turner, Executive Director of Michigan Public. You might have heard that public media is under threat. You're not wrong. But I come to tell you that your voice has power. Visit protectmypublicmedia.org, contact your lawmakers, and take a stand today.
From Michigan Public, this is It's Just Politics. I'm Zoe Clark.
And I'm Rick Pluta.
I'm committed to building an economy where every family has what they need to succeed.
Lieutenant Governor Garlin Gilchrist becomes the latest Democrat to jump into the race for governor.
So our children can follow their dreams right here in Michigan.
But lieutenant governors in Michigan don't have a great history of going on to win the top spot. We will be joined in a few to talk a little bit more about that race. But first, Rick, you spoke with Gilchrist in the early morning hours right after his announcement.
I did, and I started by asking him, of course, why he should be the next governor of Michigan.
Rick, I'm an engineer and a problem solver, and I've spent time in all 83 counties of Michigan more than 3 times, getting to know people and listening to what's important to them, what they're excited about, but also what they're anxious about and the problems that they have. And I'm a problem solver. I'm a solution builder, and I've demonstrated that on the issues that matter to people, from housing to health care. I want Michigan to be the best place for people to know that they can be their best, they can stay, they can succeed, they can have an idea and be successful. And I've delivered on results to make that happen for the last 6 years, and I want to build on that foundation as the next governor.
What will a signature issue of your campaign be?
Well, there's going to be a lot of issues that are important, but I'll give you 2. So on housing, I'm the only candidate in this race who has delivered, starting back in 2019 when I did a tour called Thriving Cities, going to communities all across the state of Michigan and talking about what it took for them to thrive, and heard about the issues of affordable housing. And as a result of that, I spearheaded the push for hundreds of millions of dollars to go into our state housing trust fund. That's resulted in 60,000 new housing units coming online since that time. Another issue is healthcare. You know, during COVID, during the pandemic, when we saw big racial disparities and disparities in terms of income and wealth, I led the task force that made Michigan the only state in the country to close the disparity on COVID-19 deaths. But also, I've led on mental health services in every single community, Rick. I hear from parents who are like me, who may have school-age kids and are concerned about their kids' mental health and well-being, or veterans and their families' health and well-being. I helped to create the Certified Community Behavioral Health Clinic program alongside Senator Debbie Stabenow that has increased the capacity of mental health service providers who participate in it by as much as 40%. We want to build on that foundation to deliver the solutions, again, so people can feel their best, be their best, and to stay and succeed. So those are 2 issues or examples of the kinds of solutions I'm going to build, the problems we're going to solve to make things happen and make things better for Michiganders.
How will you distinguish yourself from Governor Whitmer, who's been your partner now for more than half a decade?
You know, we are in different times. I'm really proud of the work that I've done with Governor Whitmer. We solved a ton of problems and laid a good foundation for the future. Times change, Rick. You know, when we took office in 2018, TikTok was a music app. Large language models and AI were things that a lot of people had never heard of or didn't really understand. And different times call for different leadership with different experiences. And I bring that as a software engineer, as a software entrepreneur, as a person who understands technology and problem solving and solution building. You know, I'm the kind of person who's ready to get in here in this moment and get things done. And I think this is the leadership we need to meet the moment and the opportunities and the challenges that we face.
I am sure you know the track record of lieutenant governors who run for governor in Michigan. It's been more than 4 decades since a lieutenant governor has succeeded the governor they've served with. You know this. Why do you think you can break that trend?
Because, again, the record and relationships and results that I've built and delivered here in the state of Michigan is really different. I'm the only candidate in this race that has spent that much time with people all over Michigan, delivering and bringing value to them, their lives, the local economies, to make Michigan the best place for us to stay and succeed. So I'm building on a foundation that is strong because of the work that I put in, and I'm going to go out there and continue to be people-driven and people-first and earn that support, earn that trust, earn that rapport, and keep delivering. That's what I do. You know, I build solutions. That's, as an engineer, it's where I'm most comfortable. And so that's very different than my predecessors, but it's going to be the right leadership for the future of Michigan.
Finally, LG, you said you will push back against President Trump, who won Michigan last year, and maybe push back harder than Governor Whitmer. Why?
Well, look, my job as governor of Michigan is going to be to protect and promote and advance the interests of the state of Michigan. And whenever they're under threat, whether it's the tens of thousands of federal workers who are under threat and have already bringing layoffs to the state of Michigan, I think about people like my father, who worked for 34 years for the Department of Defense. He got the job when I was 3 months old, and he worked in the Stryker Brigade combat vehicle, an important part of the Army's arsenal. And had he been summarily fired by Elon Musk with no rhyme or reason, that vehicle could have been less safe, lives wouldn't have been saved, and our family's economic stability would have been decimated. I'm going to stand up for those families in Michigan who are under that kind of threat. So you got to play defense. But Rich, I'm 6'8", I'm a ball player, and sometimes the best defense is a good offense. So I will absolutely not hesitate to take on this administration when it serves the interests of people in Michigan.
Lieutenant Governor Garlin Gilchrist, thanks for your time.
Thanks, Rick.
So let's turn now to Zach Gorchow, president of Gongwer News Service and the co-host of the Mishmash podcast. Hey, Zach.
Hello, Zoe.
And Beth LeBlanc, politics reporter at the Detroit News. Hey, Beth.
Hey, Zoe.
So, Beth, I want to start with you first. Let's just put Gilchrist into the mix here. What does this mean for this open race?
Well, I think it defines a little more about the governor's race, and then it excludes some folks who won't be running for Senate, right? I think those are the two positions that people have been moving pieces on the chessboard to figure out who's running for which one for a while. It's kind of become a tradition that lieutenant governors enter the race when their governor is ending the end of their term. So it was a little bit expected. But I also think in recent weeks, we've seen kind of a departure in messaging between Whitmer and Gilchrist, in particular as it relates to Trump. And I think that's been a really interesting development in that Whitmer has been a little more restrained in her criticism of the president. She has voiced that she's going to try and work with the president. And I think Lieutenant Governor Gilchrist has been a little more on the attack mode and calling out what is happening with the president at the federal level. So I think as a first brush at what this might look like, that's one of the big differences that we've been seeing even before this announcement, but after it as well.
Yeah, asked Gilchrist about this. Zach, what do you make of this strategy?
Well, I think Gilchrist knows that there is, in the Democratic base, a desire to take on Trump. And there's a lot of restlessness among many Democrats about how Governor Whitmer has decided, I'm going to work with the president, and is not the Gretchen Whitmer of 2020. So I think he's trying to, set himself apart in that way. And that's always the problem for lieutenant governors. They are tied inextricably to their governor, and the idea that this is somehow a third term for the governor that they've served with, up against what is usually a desire for some change in the electorate. So they have to battle that. And the fact that being lieutenant governor is so anonymous. I mean, all of us, of course, know who the lieutenant governor is, but most people don't. They don't run on their own. They're like the vice president. Their fate is tied to the governor. And I would suspect Garlin Gilchrist's name recognition among a general electorate right now is very low, much lower than Jocelyn Benson's, maybe a little bit better than Chris Swanson, the Genesee County Sheriff, third Democratic candidate in the race. But that is going to be a big problem for him. He's known to Democratic activists, the people who show up to conventions and do the door-to-door work. But there's a lot more Democratic voters in the primary than those activists, a lot more. And he's got a lot of work to do.
You wrote about this past weekend in the Gongwer blog, and part of it is about this history of lieutenant governors and how they fare. How do you think that this is going to mix?
I mean, it's really hard to look past this history. So since we went to the system where the lieutenant governor is not a standalone election and is tied to the fate of the governor's race, there have been 4 lieutenant governors who have tried to run for governor. Not only have none of them won, only one of them even made it to the general election. 2 lost in primaries, 1 didn't even make it to the ballot. So it's a pretty daunting history that Gilchrist is facing. That said, I think he does have some potential. He's relatively young. It's kind of hard to believe, but I don't believe there's ever been a black candidate for governor on a Democratic gubernatorial primary ballot. I mean, forget even getting nominated. I mean, there just hasn't even been one. And he, assuming he goes and gets the signatures he needs, which I'm sure he will, he's going to be the first. And Black voters are a huge part of a statewide Democratic primary. And as he himself said, I think in a number of interviews, he cannot take that for granted. It's not like Black voters are just going to vote for him because he is Black. But I have to think there's going to be a lot of excitement, particularly in Detroit, where he's from, about possibly getting the first Black nominee for governor as a Democrat. And that, is a natural potential for him to generate some excitement about, like, okay, this isn't just Whitmer the third term. I think that this isn't your garden variety lieutenant governor candidate, but it's still really tough.
We should mention that we keep talking about the first Black Democratic nominee for governor, the possibility. The Republicans did nominate a Black candidate for governor when they nominated Bill Lucas, the Wayne County executive.
That's right, 1986.
Beth, I have to wonder, as we're talking about the city of Detroit, one name that we haven't brought up is the independent candidate, Mike Duggan, who is going to be running, has announced that he's running, needs to get some petition signatures to be able to run as an independent. But really, there's been some conversation about what that run is going to do and whether it sort of splits the votes within the Democratic Party, because, of course, the mayor has run previously as a Democrat.
Yeah, I don't think it's been a while since we've seen an independent candidate enter a race like this, in particular in such a divisive time between the parties and in politics. So with that said, that may be a wild card in this, but I guess I don't see a scenario where Mike Duggan doesn't just split the Democratic ticket or at least chip off people from the Democratic ticket. I think that's a worry of many Democrats right now. And there's still a long time before the general election as well. Things could change. He could drop out. He could throw his support behind a certain Democratic candidate. So I think that concern remains, but I think people are also cautious about the timing and how much time there is until the general election for things to change drastically.
I mean, 20 months. we are 20 months away. Well,
I suspect that things will change drastically multiple times.
In American politics, I think that's a safe bet. We are talking with Beth LeBlanc of the Detroit News, Zach Gorchow of Gongwer. So let's turn to the legislature, where we saw something pretty extraordinary late last week. A $20 billion budget passed in the month of March with only hours of notice. Beth, can you just give us a quick background of what actually happened?
Yeah, I think I'm still digesting it a little bit too. I'll do my best here. So last week, late morning, House Speaker Matt Hall announced that because of concerns that in divided government, they wouldn't be able to reach a budget by September 30th as they're required to under the Constitution, that he would pass essentially a partial budget to fund essential services past September 30th. So that if it did get to the point where they weren't able to reach an agreement on September 30th, then at least prisons would be funded, state police would be funded, local governments would get their revenue sharing. So it was to basically account for that. But of course, when you're passing a budget of only $20 billion, when last year's was $83 billion, it raises some eyebrows among those who have to put their vote behind it. And Democrats were very concerned about this prospect. They were very vocal about their opposition to it. For example, the education budget that passed was $15 billion, about $5 billion less than last year. So if at the end of the day, that is all that is funded for education, there's a lot left on the table, like school lunches, school transportation. There's a lot there that wouldn't get through. So, Republicans in the House have vowed that this isn't the end, that this is just a fail-safe in case things get hairy at the very end with things. But at this point, those who are voting on it basically have to take them at their word. Mm-hmm. So it was a very unorthodox approach. It definitely raised some concerns. And It also, for me at least, it raised some analysis about why 6 months ahead of the deadline, there's already concerns about not passing the budget. And House Republicans have said, well, that's because we're going to be negotiating all of the details of this and making sure there's no waste or abuse of funding at the end of the day. But it's going to be a long call if we're already discussing the general budget right now.
So I guess, Zach, what is this? Is this a serious budget proposal? Is it a negotiating position? Is it something else? I mean, maybe is it a continuing resolution, if you see where I'm going?
This was really strange. It took me a while to get my head around what exactly was happening here. And I think there's a few different things going on. I think you have to look at what's happening in Washington and the whole DOGE, Department of Government Efficiency, the Elon Musk operation that's slashing away at the size of the federal government. And a lot of Republican voters are really excited about this and think like Trump's doing what he promised. And this is great. Finally, someone's taking a whack at the bureaucracy. And so, at the state level, Republicans are not going to be able to do that because, of course, there's still a Democratic governor and there's a Democratic Senate. But I think there's probably a feeling, hey, here's a chance for us to just kind of show our voters, meaning Republican voters, we're trying to do what we can. And it's a free vote because it will never happen. The bill is dead on arrival. I think, Winnie Brinks probably, threw it in the trash can as soon as the bill came over to the
Senate
south
Majority
side of the
Leader.
Capitol in the Senate. Yes, the Senate Majority Leader. So I think that's part of what was going on. I think the other piece is some sort of a reactiveness to Democrats saying, hey, look, there's no reason we can't get a budget done by the end of June and comply with this July 1 statutory deadline. And as Speaker Matt Hall and the chair of the House Appropriations Committee, Rep. Ann Bolin, have said, well, the real deadline is September 30th, the end of the fiscal year. We're not going to be, rush a budget through. And it sort of left this idea like, boy, like Beth was saying, like this could be a real slog to get the budget done. And there's sort of been whispers, like, could we be looking at the first shutdown since 2009? That it feels like this might have been the Speaker and the House Republican majority be saying, well, we'll show you, we're going to say we'll pass a I don't even know if you could call it bare bones, but some type of a bare bones budget to keep the lights on in state government if there's no budget. But I will say I'm very surprised by this. I mean, it's not even the end of March. I mean, this feels like the kind of gambit you might try on September 20th. And I will say, from a political standpoint, if I'm the Democrats, I'm probably absolutely ecstatic with this. I mean, it won't take much to fly-spec this bill and hang it around the necks of a number of Republican members. Now, of course, we're a million miles away from 2026. But this seems like a pretty easy mail piece, much as the Republicans went after the Democrats on school safety and mental health last year for maybe an ill-advised vote. This feels like that. This feels like an unnecessary choice that was made.
So fascinating. $20 billion of fascination. That is Zach Gorchow, president of Gongwer News Service and the co-host of the Mishmash podcast, and Beth LeBlanc, politics reporter at the Detroit News. Thank you so much for lending your brains today.
Great to be here.
Thanks for having us.
And hey, if you want to come talk politics with us, come join in on our next Issues and Ale event. We're actually going to have a bipartisan panel of lawmakers talking about the first few months of divided power in Lansing. And you, of course, can get all of your political questions answered. The next It's Just Politics Issues and Ale is March 27th in Lansing. It's free, but you got to sign up at the website. Head to michiganpublic.org/events. And that is It's Just Politics for today. I am Zoe Clark.
And I'm Rick Pluta.
Let's talk again next week.